record today, okay? So this is the lecture that I will be using. You need to have something to write with or write on so that you can take your notes, and then you can type them into your interactive notebook when you are done and ready for that for Unit 2. All right, but we are going to get into Road to Revolution, and your assignment for today will be this song analysis, and I'll get to that before the day is over for sure. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Road to Revolution means for America. Right? Pretty self-explanatory. This is, we're getting on the road, right? We are in our car, we've packed our snacks, we're put the keys in the ignition, and we're driving down the road to American Revolution, right? I wonder what revolutionary snacks would be. Maybe Twizzlers, I'm not sure. So how did we actually get here? There's a lot that brought us here, but the most important thing that you can just immediately go to when someone says, hey, what do you think is the start of the American Revolution? You can tell them PEEP, right? 1763, PEEP is the start of the American Revolution. And PEEP stands for Pontiac's Rebellion, End of Salutary Neglect, End of the French and Indian War, Proclamation Line of 1763. All right, I'll jot that in the chat for you guys again so we remember. Where's my chat? Or maybe I won't. Maybe it won't let me. But real simple, we've gone over it. I've given it to you a bunch of times already. 1763, PEEP, Pontiac's Rebellion, End of the French and Indian War, End of Salutary Neglect, Proclamation Line of 1763. It doesn't really matter which end of you put first, right? As long as you know that they're both ends of something. And that's really, really important because the end of salutary neglect is the beginning of parliamentary sovereignty. This is the moment where Great Britain starts to enforce rules and laws and take back power that she had previously given to her American colonies, to her kids. So think about it this way, right? Let's say, before I would always say, let's say I'm a mom, but I am a mom, right? So let's say that, that JD, my son, is all grown up, and I have a rule that there are no snacks before dinner time. And he comes home from school one day and he goes in the pantry and he pulls out a big old bag of chips and he starts like munching away. And I'm like, JD, you know the rule. There's no snacks before dinner time. I'm making a lovely dinner. I've slaved over this, this hot stove for hours. And he says, oh, but Mom, I'm really, really hungry. Like, I'm so hungry, okay? I'm like, all right, but just this one time. You're only allowed to have them this one time, right? So I have a rule. I'm not enforcing it. He's going to take advantage of that. So the next day he comes home from school, he goes in the pantry, grabs a bag of chips, and he grabs the Oreos. And I'm like, dude, JD, I told you, right? It was a one-time thing. There's no snacks before dinner, man. He's like, but Mom, I was really hungry yesterday, but I'm like extra hungry today. Okay, extra hungry. And I'm like, okay, but this is the only time. All right, not happening again. Third day, he comes home from school, he grabs the chips, he grabs the Oreos, he grabs the freaking candy, right? I'm like, all right, done, this is it, no more snacks, give them to me, you're grounded, go to your room, etc. He's gonna throw a fit, he's gonna be upset. He's gonna say, but you let me eat the snacks yesterday and the day before, why are you now enforcing this rule? That is what's happening here, guys. Great Britain's the mom, okay? Great Britain is me. The American colonies are her kids, right? They're JD. And she has rules that she was real lax about, that she didn't enforce, and now she's enforcing them, and the American colonies are throwing a temper tantrum. The American Revolution is the greatest temper tantrum, okay? So Great Britain is going to start enforcing some things and passing some acts and laws and taxes that require the colonists to pay taxes and essentially pay off the war debts of the French and Indian War, something that they're really not happy about. So you have this whole lead up, right? 1763, PEEP, 65 to 67, you have the Stamp and the Townsend Acts, 73 to 75, you have the Boston Tea Party, where we dump all the tea in Boston Harbor, greatest riot in American history, the beginning of riots in the US, Intolerable Acts, Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. We start fighting the revolution in 1775, but we don't even declare independence until a year later in 76. Right? We're reluctant revolutionaries. So let's go ahead and get into the things that lead us up to 76, the things that lead us right up to, hey, we are independent now. And that starts with the Stamp Act. So important things here to note, right, is what the Stamp Act is. That's the British action. And then what the colonial reaction to that is. So 1765 is a Stamp Act. It's a tax law, requires colonists to purchase these special stamps to prove payment. And colonists are not fans, right? Not fans at all. They're going to harass stamp distributors. They're going to boycott British goods. And they're going to write up this document called the Declaration of Rights and Grievances. These boycotters of these British goods, they are our first patriots. All right, that's what they get called. And it's very much a mob reaction to the Stamp Act. People are really upset about this, and they don't take it lying down, right? In fact, they boycott, they harass stamp distributors. This is where you get your tar and feathering, where these poor tax collectors, they're just doing their job. They get hot tar poured all over them and then feathers tossed on top of them because, you know, the tar wasn't enough. They needed to be humiliated beyond belief, beyond just third-degree burns. So out of the Stamp Act in 1765, you get some of the first colonial organizations that are going to play a large part in the revolution, and that is the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty. So just some examples, right, and visuals of what that mob reaction was like. They hung effigies of these tax collectors. They put a likeness of King George up on a stick. Like, people are mad, okay? People are mad. And the reason why people are mad is because this was passed in Parliament. It wasn't passed in the colonial assemblies, and they felt that they did not have representation in Parliament. So Sons of Liberty, Daughters of Liberty, they protest these British restrictions. They become the leaders of this colonial resistance. You get Samuel Adams out of the Sons of Liberty. And guess what? That colonial boycott is incredibly effective, right? Great Britain actually repeals the Stamp Act. So what that means is that they take it back. They say, all right, no more Stamp Act. We're going to get rid of it. Fine, whatever. We heard you. You're pissed off. We get it, right? Repealed the Stamp Act. But it doesn't stop there. If it stopped there, we might still be part of Great Britain today, right? But it didn't. So in 1767, Great Britain is going to pass the Townshend Acts. And remember, when you see acts, it's just a law. It's a law that's providing a tax, right? Putting a tax on people. So the British action, the Townshend Acts are going to tax colonial imports like lead, glass, paper, tea. That's a big one. They're going to station troops at major colonial ports to protect those custom officers, because we already saw with the Stamp Act what happened, right? We tarred and feathered stamp collectors, big mob reaction. These people were in danger. So Great Britain is going to send troops over to protect the people who have to carry out this law, those customs officers. Colonial reaction, taxation without representation, guys. Right? We're going to protest this. We're going to boycott these imported goods again, which simply means that we're not going to buy them. All right? That's what a boycott is. So the Townshend Acts are indirect taxes on lead, glass, paper, tea, right? Y'all, they taxed our tea and we lost it, okay? We couldn't even comprehend the idea of somebody putting a tax on our tea. God for frickin' bid, right? So you start to see again these protests. You see new boycotts being organized. This is where you also see again tar and feathering of the customs officers, the tax collectors. And you see the creation of the committees of correspondence, right? So more boycotts and protests. Here's some tar and feathering. So if we look at this picture right here, a couple of things that you can immediately point out, right? This tree back here, what does this tree say on it? Somebody drop it in the chat for me. Y'all, what's it say on the tree? Let's go. All you have to do is write in the chat. Not that hard. Exactly, right? Liberty Tree. And if you can tell, there's a piece of paper turned upside down here. That's the Stamp Act, right? And what's hanging from the tree? Particularly, right, a rope fashioned into a noose. So the idea that maybe they're going to hang this poor guy after tarring him, feathering him, shoving tea down his throat, they're going to go ahead and kill him as well. All right, who knows? And in the background here, you see tea being dumped, goods being dumped into the water. So a look forward to the future, to the Boston Tea Party as well. So let's take a really quick minute. I have a video to show you guys that that'll help you guys understand the Townsend Acts. So we'll take a real quick look at that.
Were generally peaceful and productive, but also a fiercely independent bunch. The British, however, not so keen on fostering that independence. Fed up by acts of dissent against their rule, the royal crown imposed severe taxes to show the colonies who was boss. These taxes were known as the Townsend Acts. And to better understand their creation and effect on the colonies, here are 5 things that you need to know. Before the Townsend Acts, the British passed a hated piece of legislation called the Stamp Act, which taxed anything made of paper in the 13 colonies. We're talking contracts, wills, deeds, newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, even playing cards. Boston protesters hanged their city's tax collector in effigy and ransacked his home. Many colonial merchants embargoed British goods until the tax was lifted. Less than a year after its introduction, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. This only encouraged England to come up with more creative ways to squeeze the colonies for more money. Meet Charles Townshend, British treasurer and all-around unpopular guy in the colonies. Townshend was a financial whiz, but a clueless policymaker. He calculated that England could raise a ton of revenue by placing a tax on colonial imports, such as lead, glass, paint, tea, and paper. His rationale was that the colonists would be more willing to pay taxes on imported goods rather than on items produced locally. He couldn't have been more wrong. The Townsend Acts drew colonial fury. The most effective fight against them came from a farmer in Pennsylvania. All right, well, technically John Dickinson was a lawyer, but he published a series of essays under the pen name of A Farmer in Pennsylvania. Anyway, Dickinson argued that the Townsend Acts would set a dangerous precedent of taxation without fair representation in government. His letters unified colonial opposition against the British rule and influenced how Americans believed a government should behave. The ultimate showdown took place in Boston, where the Crown collected all taxes under the Townsend Acts. No one hated these acts more than the Bostonians, who relied on imports for their economy, and so they rioted. 4 British Army regiments moved to occupy Boston Harbor to maintain order in 1768. All right, spoiler alert, the British occupation of Boston was a disaster. On the night of March 5th, 1770,
All right, so we're going to pause it there because we're going to talk about the Boston Massacre as well today. But that's a perfect segue, right? So things are really kind of heating up here in the colonies. We're tarring and feathering customs officers. We are creating colonial protest organizations like the Sons of Liberty, the Daughters of Liberty. We are using the committees of correspondence to communicate with each other. And we're getting heated, okay? And you have to remember that in 1765, we already created a document saying why we're getting heated. The Declaration of Rights and Grievances. We tell the government, hey, we have certain rights and you're trampling on them. We have certain grievances, which means complaints, and these are our complaints, so fix them, right? We've already come to our government. We've already told them what we are upset about, okay? But it all really starts to become even worse with the Boston Massacre in 1770. So in 1770, you have the Boston Massacre. This occurs because of the Townsend Acts, because you have British troops stationed in Boston. They're occupying Boston. Boston really becomes a hotbed of activity. People are very angry, and these troops are going to be taunted by a very angry mob. They're going to fire into the crowd. They're going to kill 5 colonists, including an African-American Crispus Attucks. So you have this colonial reaction to the Boston Massacre. Just imagine what that would be like, right? They're going to label the conflict a massacre first and foremost. Paul Revere is going to publish a really dramatic engraving depicting the violence in Boston at that time. And Paul Revere's engraving becomes an incredible propaganda piece. It is used to push the colonists closer and closer to revolution, right? It becomes an American bestseller, this engraving right here. There are a couple of videos in here that I'm not going to show you in class today, but I would recommend you watch. Boston Massacre meme story is pretty good. It's funny and very informative. And this one just kind of gives you a little brief overview of the Boston Massacre in terms of the engraving as well. So this is the engraving that Paul Revere creates, right? And when you look at it, it appears that these are just colonists, right, standing in front of British troops that have been gunned down right here. And it even looks like he put a woman in the mob as well. There's blood everywhere. There's a puppy dog down here at the bottom. If you look over here above the British troops, this says Butcher's Hall. So a very negative connotation to that, implying that these British troops are butchers, right? Here's the thing. The troops were definitely taunted and aggravated, okay? They had actually, the colonists had actually been throwing snowballs at the soldiers. Now, granted, snowballs should not be met with bullets at any point in time, okay? But those snowballs had oyster shells in them and rocks, and so there's a little bit more behind this story than just what you see on this particular engraving. And 5 people dead. There was a very large mob. It wasn't even the majority of the people there that died, so it's a little difficult to name it a massacre, but that's what they did because that word has power, right? It has power in terms of igniting this anger across the entire colonial America. When you see this engraving and you hear about this massacre, these innocent colonists who were just standing around in a square and the British soldiers opened fire on them, okay? So you have to keep in mind that Paul Revere very much wanted this to go a certain way. He very much wanted people to feel a certain way about this event, and he wanted colonists to get closer and closer to revolution. Paul Revere, right, is also the guy who, right, supposed to ride through the night saying the British are coming, etc. So if you're looking at this square, you have this is the larger picture of the engraving called the Bloody Massacre. Very dirty over here on the colonial side, right? It makes it very clean over here on the British side, as though the British have everything that's good and awesome and fantastic, and the colonists kind of get left with leftovers. They get the rest that sucks. That Butcher's Hall that I mentioned, the church in the background. It's very gory when you think about it. I mean, there's blood coming out of all these people. So supposed to be a very, very dramatic engraving, supposed to invoke a certain emotion in these colonists. In 1773, Great Britain is going to pass the Tea Act, right? They haven't realized that all of these taxes are really starting to piss people off. They're saying, oh, what's one more, right? And when you think about it, Great Britain has a lot of war debts to pay off. They had to do these things. So what Great Britain does with the Tea Act is they give the East India Company special privileges, and they shut out colonial tea merchants. Colonists are going to rebel, right? They're going to dump 18,000 pounds of East India Company tea into the Boston Harbor. Today, in today's money, that is $1.7 million worth of tea. $1.7 million worth of tea. And so the Boston Tea Party becomes an incredibly important step in the Revolutionary War, in the road to revolution, right? This, you had white colonists who dressed up like Native Americans for some stupid reason. and they hopped onto the boats in the Boston Harbor and dumped all the tea overboard. And here's all the other colonists saying, hooray, you're doing a fantastic job, right? Guys, our country was built on a riot. This is a riot, okay? All of the protests against Great Britain, they all turned very riotous very quickly. So I'm going to show you a quick video because it's a little fun. We're not going to watch all of it. But
writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
I'm sorry, that's life.
I just can't believe what Britain did to me. Made an act of tea. Made an act of tea. The East India Company granted a monopoly. 773. 773. They just keep taxing, never think of asking. Colonists of Boston, let's protest, saying it's gotta be alright. And we're going on a boat. Better grab a coat. We're just gonna dump it off. It's the middle of the night. And we're fighting for our right. We're just gonna dump it off.
I'm sorry, that's not the best thing you've ever seen. Like, I literally don't know what is, okay? So, right, they're gonna go onto the boat in the middle of the night and dump it off. It's just a cute song, it's catchy, and I hope it's a good, funny start to your day. I like when the little girl does the clapping. That's my favorite part. Right, so how does Great Britain react to the Boston Tea Party? Well, it was not a party for them, okay? They did not like this party. They, 1 out of 10 would not recommend it. The British are gonna actually punish the colonists for the Boston Tea Party with the Intolerable Acts. One of the biggest things they're gonna do is close Boston Harbor, right? They're gonna close the Boston port, tighten control over Massachusetts and the rest of the colony. So in 1774, the Intolerable Acts are essentially the punishment that you have for the Boston Tea Party. KG3, King George III, tightens control, closes Boston Harbor, begins quartering of troops, right, forcing colonists to house these British troops. And colonial reaction to that is the First Continental Congress. This is where we really start putting pen to paper and saying, hey, you're going to need to really start to listen to us because we are upset. We are not happy about this. The First Continental Congress is going to, is going to say, hey, right, we got to help Boston out. They're going to draw up a declaration of colonial rights. They're going to say boycott. It's worked so far in the past. It'll work here, right? And the First Continental Congress did what the Albany Union could not. Unified the colonies. Unified the colonies. So way back before the French and Indian War, Benjamin Franklin, his plan of union, the Albany Congress, etc., didn't unify colonists. This right here, this does. Okay, people really start to rally around the colonists in this particular aspect, right? They really say, you know what? We are one people. We are one group. We're over here in America. Great Britain is making these decisions across the Atlantic Ocean, and they don't have any right to. What do we have colonial assemblies for, if not to make these decisions? They're taking that power away from us, right? And then in 1775, you get the first shot of the American Revolution. This is what we call the shot heard around the world. British general orders troops to march to Concord, Massachusetts, seize colonial weapons. Guys, things Americans don't like. Being told what to do, being taxed, somebody taking our guns. We've had all three of those things happen to us in this time period, all right? And we've reached the limit, all right? This is the last straw for us. So colonial Minutemen are going to intercept the British. They will engage in battle, and this is where you get Lexington and Concord. So this is the shot heard around the world. This is fighting the American Revolution already, right here, right now in 1775. We are fighting a revolution, and we have not yet asked for independence. That shows we're reluctant revolutionaries. We don't really want to be independent. We just want Great Britain to leave us alone. We want to go back to salutary neglect. We want to go back to the way things were. Why can't we just do that? Right? That's what we're asking for here. And obviously, we're willing to fight for that. And when you look at the American Revolution, you really need to also understand some things that are happening outside of the United States. And that is the ideas of enlightenment. Because enlightenment was really used by the Americans to justify our protests and truly influenced the American Revolution. And there's three people in particular you have to look at: Locke, Rousseau, and Montesquieu. So John Locke wrote that people have natural rights. They're called life, liberty, and property. Sounds really familiar. I wonder if Thomas Jefferson is a plagiarist. Okay. He says life, liberty, and property, these are given to us by our Creator, by God. You can't take them away. They're unalienable. Okay. And we have the right to oppose tyranny. If any government is being tyrannical, we get to say, hey, stop doing that. You're not allowed to. Rousseau says that citizens have a social contract with their government. The government has power because us as citizens, we give them power. And if the government breaks that social contract, we get to break with the government. Okay. And Montesquieu talks about power being separated amongst different government branches rather than being put in the hands of one person, the hands of a king. And that's really important when you look at the creation of our nation and our government, right? We have three branches: executive, legislative, judicial. So all these people are going to have a really, really important role to play, not just in influencing the American Revolution, but also in influencing the government that we create after we won. Because winning is easy, but governing is harder. And we're going to find that out here, all right? So looking at Road to Revolution, right? By December 1775, the British and American colonists were fighting an informal revolutionary war. We'd done that because of Lexington and Concord, but we had not asked for independence yet until 1776. And that's where we get T-Paine, right? Thomas Paine's Common Sense is a pamphlet that he writes. He says, listen, y'all, there's no going back. It's not going to be fantastic anymore. It's not going to be salutary neglect anymore. We need to be independent. We need to be a separate nation from Great Britain. And many colonists who were on the fence, who weren't quite, patriots going for independence, they weren't exactly loyal to Great Britain. They were just like, I don't know which way I want to go. It pushed them very much over into the side of independence, right? Supporting independence from Great Britain. And then, of course, by July 76, colonists draft the Declaration of Independence. And that is definitely heavily influenced by T-Paine's Common Sense, right? It plays a very, very large role.